My fiancé invited her ex to our wedding against my will. The seating chart was on the kitchen table when I found his name. Not hidden, not tucked away. Right there in her handwriting. Third table from the front. Name tag already printed. Marcus Webb, guest of the bride. I stood in the kitchen holding that chart for 4 minutes without moving. I know it was 4 minutes because the microwave clock changed twice. While I was standing there, trying to convince myself I was reading it wrong. I wasn't reading it wrong. I knew that name. I had spent 18 months hearing that name in arguments, in apologies, in late-night confessions where my fiancée, Dana, sat across from me and swore up and down. That Marcus Webb was the past. That Marcus Webb was a mistake. That Marcus Webb was someone she had closed the door on permanently. His name was on my wedding seating chart. I set the paper down very carefully because my hands were starting to shake and I did not want to crumple it. I needed that paper exactly as it was. Evidence. Proof that I was not manufacturing a problem out of nothing the way Dana sometimes said I did when the subject of Marcus came up. I was not being paranoid. I was not being controlling. The man's name was printed on a card, sitting 3 tables from where I was going to stand and promise my life to someone who had apparently decided his presence at that moment was not something that required my input. I took a picture of the seating chart with my phone. Then I sent it to my best man, Reggie, with no caption, just the image. Reggie called back in under a minute. Bro, he said. Yeah, I said. Is that who I think it is? Yes. Does she know you found it? Not yet. Where is she right now? Bridal shower. She won't be back until 7. Reggie was quiet for 3 seconds. I counted. Then he said, don't touch anything. Don't move anything. Sit down and wait for me because you need a witness when you have this conversation. I told him I didn't need a witness. He said, you need a witness. He was right. I knew he was right because I already knew what Dana was going to do when I confronted her. She was going to make me feel like the problem. She was going to redirect the conversation away from what she did and toward some flaw in how I was reacting to what she did. She had done this before, not about Marcus specifically, but about other things. That made me feel like the floor was moving under me. She was good at it. She had a law degree and she used it in her personal life as effectively as she used it professionally. And I loved her fiercely, which made me vulnerable to exactly this kind of maneuvering. Reggie showed up at 5:45 with a bag of chips and a look on his face like he was coming to a deposition. We sat at the kitchen table. The seating chart was still there between us. Walk me through what you know about this guy, Reggie said. So I did. Marcus Webb and Dana had dated for 3 years before we met. They had been serious. Apartment together serious. Meet the parents serious. The kind of serious where you start talking about future tense things and using the word we without thinking about it. They had broken up about a year before. Dana and I crossed paths at a work conference in Chicago. Dana had told me about Marcus relatively early on in our dating. She said he was emotionally unavailable. She said he had a problem with honesty that ran deep enough to have poisoned everything between them. She said leaving him had cost her 2 months of therapy and a close friend group that had split down the middle when they did. She had also told me, specifically and clearly, about 8 months into our relationship when I had first asked, that she had not spoken to Marcus Webb in over a year and had no plans to change that. That was 18 months ago. So either she had been telling the truth then and things had changed since, or she had not been telling the truth then. Either option made my stomach feel like a fist. Have you seen her phone recently? Reggie asked. I told him I was not the kind of person who checked my partner's phone. He nodded slowly. Okay, but have you noticed anything? I thought about it honestly because Reggie deserved honesty and so did I. And then I thought about 2 months ago, when Dana had started going to bed with her phone face down. I had noticed it. I had filed it away under the category of things I don't want to think about because thinking about it would have required either action or deliberate denial, and I had chosen a third option, which was pretending the category didn't exist. I told Reggie about the phone. He ate a chip. He did not say I told you so. He is a good friend. There's more, I said. About 6 weeks ago, Dana had come home from what she'd said was a happy hour with her colleague Priya. She had been in an unusually good mood. Like, lit from inside, good mood. The kind of good mood that doesn't come from happy hour with a coworker. I had thought at the time that maybe she'd had good news about a case. I had thought that because that was easier than the other thing I had almost thought and then refused to think. Reggie finished the chip. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "When does she get home?" I said, "About an hour." He said, "Okay, here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to lead with emotion. You're not going to yell. You're not going to accuse her of anything you can't prove. You're going to ask her about the seating chart, and you're going to let her talk, and you're going to listen to every single word she says and how she says it, because that's where the truth is going to live." I asked him how he knew all this. He said, "I watched my parents do this exact conversation wrong. Twice. I know what it looks like when it goes bad." So that was the plan. Dana came home at 7:12. She was still in her bridal shower clothes, pink cardigan, white jeans, and she was carrying leftover cake in a box, and she was smiling, and she looked beautiful, and I hated how much I still wanted to walk across the room and kiss her because the seating chart was still on the table between me and Reggie, and she hadn't seen it yet. She saw Reggie first. "Oh, hey, Reggie," she said. "I didn't know you were coming over." "Hey, Dana," Reggie said. "Neutral. Professional. Good." Then she saw the seating chart. Her face did something. It was fast. If I hadn't been watching specifically for it, I might have missed it. A flicker. A micro-expression of something that might have been calculation or might have been fear. It was gone in under a second, and then her face was composed, and she set the cake box down on the counter and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Can you tell me about the seating chart?" She said, "What about it?" I said, "Marcus Webb." She said, "I was going to talk to you about that." And there it was. Not a denial. Not confusion. Not Marcus who. She already knew exactly what I was talking about, which meant she had known this conversation was coming and she had not initiated it. She had waited for me to find it. "Were you?" I said. "Yes," she said. She set her purse down. She pulled out a chair. She Saturday. She was in full lawyer mode. I had seen it happen in real time. The way she assembled herself into the version of Dana who could hold any room. "I know this is a surprise." "It's not a surprise," I said. "A surprise is when you find out your flight got upgraded. This is something else." "He's changed," she said. "He reached out 6 months ago, and we've been talking, and he's a different person, and I think it would be really meaningful to have him there as a symbol of." "Stop," I said. She stopped. "6 months," I said. She nodded. "You've been talking to Marcus Webb for 6 months." She nodded again. Very controlled. "And you're telling me now. 3 weeks before our wedding. After I found his name on the seating chart." "I was going to tell you," she said. "I was waiting for the right time." "The right time was 6 months ago," I said. "Or 5 months. Or 4. Or at any point in the last half a year when you were having regular contact with your ex-boyfriend of 3 years, and I was right here living with you." "You have a complicated history with the idea of Marcus," she said. Reggie made a sound. It was very quiet, but I heard it. "Complicated history with the idea of Marcus," I repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means that every time his name has come up, you've reacted in a way that made it hard for me to be honest with you about. His name has come up 3 times in 3 years, Dana. 3 times. And every time you told me there was nothing there, and it was in the past, and you had no contact with him. Those were your words. I was responding to your words. I did not react to his name. I reacted to the information you were giving me, which was later determined to be false." She looked at Reggie. I think she was hoping he would soften the room. He did not soften the room. "I wasn't lying," she said. "Things changed." "When things changed," I said, "you had a partner you could have told." She was quiet. "Why is he on the seating chart?" I said, "Because I want him at our wedding." That's not an answer. That's a restatement. Why do you want the man you dated for 3 years, who you had no contact with, who reached out to you 6 months ago, and you've been secretly talking to, at our wedding?" She looked down at the table, then up at me, and I saw something shift in her eyes. Something that made the floor under me start moving again. "Because he matters to me," she said. The room was very quiet. Reggie stood up. "I'm gonna go get some air," he said. He meant he was giving us space. He was a better friend than I deserved. When he left, I sat down across from Dana, and I looked at her for a long time without speaking. "How much does he matter to you?" I said. "Not in the way you're thinking," she said. Quickly. Too quickly. "How do you know what I'm thinking?" "Because I know you. And you're going to the worst place in your head right now, and that's not where this is." "Where is it then?" She leaned forward. She put her hands on the table. Her engagement ring caught the light. My grandmother's ring. A thing I had given her with my whole chest open. He's been going through something, she said. His mother died. He went through a really dark time. He reached out because I was someone he'd trusted and he needed someone to talk to. And I made a judgment call that helping a person in pain was the right thing to do even if it was complicated. I sat with that. And you couldn't tell me that, I said. I didn't know how to explain it in a way that wouldn't hurt me. She nodded. So you protected me from pain by hiding something that is causing significantly more pain now that I've found it. She didn't answer that. Dana, I said. And I said her name very quietly because the moment required quiet. I need you to look at me and tell me the honest truth right now. Not the managed version. Not the lawyer version. The real one. Do you have feelings for Marcus Webb? She looked at me. A long time passed. Not romantic feelings, she said. That's qualified, I said. That's not the same as no. She closed her eyes. I care about him, she said. As a human being who was important to me for a long time. That's real. I can't pretend it isn't real. But it's not. It doesn't change what you and I are. It changes something, I said. It changes my understanding of the last 6 months of our relationship. It changes whether the person I'm about to marry has been fully honest with me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, she said. I genuinely am. Marcus is not coming to our wedding, I said. She looked at me. I need you to hear me on that, I said. Whatever this is, whatever you and he have been building over the last 6 months, whatever form of reconnection this is, it does not get a seat at my wedding. That's not me being controlling. That's me having a limit. You can't just, she started. I'm not asking for a negotiation, I said. I'm telling you my limit. She sat back. Her jaw tightened. And then she said something I was not expecting. She said, if you make me choose between having a full and honest life with people I care about and a relationship where you control who I'm allowed to maintain connections with, then I need to think about whether this is the right relationship for me. I stared at her. She stared back. And then Reggie came back inside because he had apparently been listening through the door screen, which I did not blame him for, and he said very quietly, I think we should all take 24 hours. Nobody argued with him. I slept at Reggie's that night. I used his guest room and I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, and I did not sleep for most of it. By 3 in the morning, I had reconstructed every major moment of the last 6 months, and I was seeing it all through a different lens now. The phone face down, the lit from inside. Good mood after happy hour with Priya. The way she had flinched, barely, when I had mentioned once that my coworker had run into Marcus at a bar and I had watched her face for a reaction, and she had given me nothing. I had given myself credit for being secure. I had not been secure. I had been avoiding the question. At 4 a.m. I got a text from Dana. It said, I don't want to lose us. But I also can't pretend that parts of me don't exist to keep the peace. Can we talk tomorrow? I did not respond that night. In the morning, Reggie made coffee and sat across from me and said, You feeling any different? No, I said. Yes. I don't know. What do you want? He asked. It was a surprisingly hard question. I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want Marcus at my wedding. I didn't want to have been lied to for 6 months. I didn't want to discover 2 weeks before my wedding that my relationship had a room in it I didn't know about. What I wanted was Dana, which was the complicated part, because wanting Dana and having the version of Dana who had done this were 2 things that did not currently fit together cleanly. I'm going to talk to her, I said, but not about Marcus. I'm going to talk to her about honesty. Reggie nodded. Good framing. If she can't have an honest conversation about honesty, I said, then I have my answer about whether we should get married. I drove back to our apartment at 9 a.m. Dana was already up. She was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, and she had clearly also not slept, and she looked like a version of herself I didn't often see, unguarded. The armor was off. Hi, she said. Hi, I said. I sat down. I did not take the coffee. She slid toward me. Not because I didn't want it, but because I needed to stay in the clarity I had arrived within coffee. Felt like comfort, and I was not ready for comfort. I need to ask you some things, I said, and I need you to answer them without managing me. She nodded. How often have you and Marcus talked in the last 6 months? She thought about it, which told me the honest number was more than she wanted to say. A few times a week, she said. A few times a week for 6 months. Yes. In what format? Calls. Texts. Both. Have you seen him in person? Long pause. Once, she said. The floor moved. When? About 2 months ago. 2 months ago. Happy hour with Priya. Was that the happy hour? I said. She looked down. Yes. So you lied to me that night. I didn't plan to. Dana, you lied to me that night. Yes, she said. Quietly. I lied to you that night. I stood up. Not in anger. My body just needed to not be sitting down. I walked to the window. The street below was normal. Somebody was walking a dog. A kid was riding a bike. The world was completely indifferent to what was happening in my kitchen. What did you do when you saw him? I said. We had dinner, she said. We talked. It was just dinner. Did you tell him you were engaged? Pause. He knew, she said. He'd known for a while. We'd talked about it. That's not what I asked. Did you tell him during dinner? Did your engagement come up as a real thing that you discussed as part of your reality together? She was quiet for a long time. Not directly, she said. I turned around from the window. Not directly, I said. It was a complicated. Did he know you were going home to your fiancé after that dinner? Yes, she said. Of course he did. But it wasn't directly discussed. He knows I'm getting married. He's coming to the… She stopped herself. He's coming to the wedding. I finished for her. The wedding that you invited him to without telling me. Because apparently the wedding is a more natural context for Marcus Webb in your life than a direct conversation about the fact that you're engaged. She put her face in her hands. Dana, I said, and I kept my voice level. I was proud of myself for that. I'm not trying to punish you. I am trying to understand what has been happening in my own life for the last 6 months. I deserve that understanding, not as a punishment, as a basic requirement. She took her hands down from her face. I don't know what I was doing, she said. I know that's not a satisfying answer, but that's the truth. When he reached out and his mom had just died and he was in a bad place, I slipped into a role with him that was familiar and I didn't examine it. And before I realized how much time had passed and how much I was hiding it from you, it had already become a thing that was impossible to just casually mention. That's the sunk cost problem, I said. You hid it longer because you'd already hidden it long enough that admitting it felt worse than continuing to hide it. Yes, she said. Exactly. That's how deception works, I said. It compounds. She winced. Marcus is not coming to our wedding, I said again. That's not negotiable. But beyond that, I need to know, are you in love with him? She looked at me with something that I could not fully read. I don't think so, she said. You don't think so? I don't know what I feel right now, she said. I know that's horrible to say, but it's honest. And you asked for honest. I sat back down. I looked at my fiancée across the table, the woman I had planned to spend my life with, the woman who had just told me she didn't know what she felt. Okay, I said. Then here's what I need. I need you to figure that out before we get married. Because I refuse to stand at an altar and make a vow to someone who doesn't know what she feels. That could take time, she said. We have 3 weeks, I said. She nodded. And Marcus is not at the wedding, I said. Okay, she said. Quietly. Okay, I said. I went back to Reggie's that night. It had become my temporary headquarters. He did not ask questions. He just handed me a beer and put a game on and let me exist in his living room. Without expectation. It was a specific kind of friendship that I had not known how much I needed until I was in the middle of needing it. My phone blew up that weekend. Dana's mother called me. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was careful and measured and said she hoped we could talk and she was sure there was a misunderstanding. Dana's mother liked me. I had always thought that was mutual. Now I wasn't sure what she knew or when she'd known it. My mother called me. I answered that one. What's happening? She said. Dana called your Aunt Patricia and said the wedding might be postponed. Dana had called my Aunt Patricia. I had not known Dana had a direct line to my Aunt Patricia. We're working through some things, I said. What kind of things? I told her the outline. Not all of it. Enough. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, your father did something similar once. Early on, before you were born. I had not known that. What happened? I said. We almost didn't make it. She said. And then we did. And what got us? Through was not that he was perfect and not that I was forgiving enough to pretend he was perfect. What got us through was that he chose. Very clearly. Without being told to. He chose. What if she doesn't choose? I said. My mother said. Then you have your answer. The week that followed was the strangest week of my life, and I have had some strange weeks. Dana and I communicated mostly by text. We were both still in the apartment, but we were orbiting each other like two objects that had once been in stable rotation and were now calculating new trajectories. She was working long hours. I was at the office, but not really at the office. I was physically present at a desk staring at a screen while my brain conducted endless internal simulations of every possible outcome. And then Wednesday happened. Wednesday was when I found out about the letter. My friend Terrence, who worked in the same building as Dana's law firm, texted me and said he had seen something and he wasn't sure whether to tell me, but he decided I would want to know. He said he had seen Dana in the lobby of her building with a man he didn't recognize. He said they were having what appeared to be a very intense conversation. He said the man had dark hair, tall, wearing a gray jacket. I knew who that was. I called Dana. She answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" I said. "At work," she said. No hesitation. Clean as glass. "Are you in the office?" "I just got back from a meeting," she said. "Why?" I did not tell her about Terrence. "Not yet." I said. "I was just checking in." "Okay," she said. "Are you all right?" "Not really," I said. "Honestly." "I know," she said. "Me neither." We hung up. I texted Terrence back and asked him what time he had seen them. He said about 40 minutes ago, which would have been during the time Dana had said she was in a meeting. I sat in my car in the parking garage under my office for 30 minutes. When I got back to the apartment that evening, Dana was home already. She was making dinner. She was making my favorite, pasta with the sauce she made from scratch that took 3 hours, and that she only made when she was trying to say something she couldn't say out loud. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her cook, and I thought about how much I had loved watching her cook. I thought about how I had told her once that watching her in the kitchen made me feel like I had found the correct version of my own life. I had said that and meant it, and she had laughed and called me dramatic and then kissed me. "You met with Marcus today?" I said. She did not drop the spoon. I had half expected her to drop the spoon. Instead, she set it down very deliberately on the spoon rest and turned around. "How did you know?" she said. "Does it matter?" It wasn't a plan. He texted me this morning and said he was near my office, and I said we could talk for a few minutes, and while we are in the middle of a crisis in our relationship, I said, while we are 3 weeks from our wedding and I am sleeping at my friend's house because I don't know what's happening in my own life. "You met with him." I needed to tell him he wasn't coming to the wedding, she said. "You could have done that by text." I thought in person was more respectful. I said, "More respectful to him." "While I'm at home." She turned back to the stove. She turned off the burner. She put both hands on the counter and stared down at the pot for a long time. "There was a letter," she said. I waited. "He wrote me a letter. A physical letter. He left it at the office. That's what he came to talk about." "What kind of letter?" I said. She was very still. "The kind where he says he still has feelings for me," she said. The kitchen was completely quiet except for the tick of the cooling burner. "And," I said, "and I told him that I was engaged and that I was getting married and that whatever this was, it couldn't continue." "Was that true when you said it?" I said. She turned around. Her eyes were wet. "Yes," she said. "That was true when I said it." "Was," I said. "Past tense." "Is," she said. "Is true." I looked at her. I looked at the pasta on the stove. I looked at my grandmother's ring on her finger. "Where's the letter?" I said.